Coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles, the Eagles and Dolphins had their first joint practice down in South Beach today. We're going to get into our takeaways, plus General Manager Howie Roseman does it again. This guy loves to make trades. It wasn't a big one, but we have some takes coming up right here on your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to a Thursday edition of the show. This episode is brought to you by Brightco Jewelry and Watch Insurance. Brightco brings you comprehensive, fast, and affordable jewelry insurance for as low as $5 per month. Check out your special offer for Locked On listeners and get covered in under 2 minutes at bright.com/lockedon. That's bright.com/lockedon. I'm Louis DiBiase. He's Gino Camilleri. We've been your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast now for 4 years running, and we are getting ready for another season. The 2022 season is right around the corner, 18 days away. Jeremy Maclin or Gino Dorial Green Beckham, if you want to get really gross. And speaking of DGB, it kind of does tie into today's show because the Eagles in August, 6 years ago now, traded for Dorial Green Beckham. And it seems like a small trade now in Eagles history. And the Eagles made another small trade today that we're going to get into later, but it's just kind of funny. I mean, Howie Roseman is always looking to make moves. But there's been a lot going on this week. The Eagles also down in Miami for joint practices, and that's where we're going to start, Gino. I feel like today, I think the consensus was the Eagles didn't win the day, but Tua Tagovailoa, the Dolphins quarterback, actually made a great point defending the Eagles, saying how they played in Cleveland Sunday, they flew back to Philadelphia and down to South Beach, crazy temperature changes there, that the exhaust was going to be kind of at its limit. And so I think that is a good reason for why maybe the Eagles were a little bit sluggish today in some areas.
You don't have the luxury now of getting 2 home preseason games and 2 away.
Right.
The Eagles have 2 away, clearly, and they happen to be back-to-back weeks in different environments, especially different than Philadelphia. And when you're traveling to an away game, you're only gone for 1 day. If it's a Sunday game, you're going to travel Saturday. You'll get home late Sunday night. Ugo Amadi, who was just traded today, spent more time outside of Philadelphia in his few days here. He spent, I believe, 4 days in Cleveland, 3 days back home in Philly, and 2 days in Miami before he gets traded again. So that just goes to show you how strenuous this training camp is. And going back to over a month ago when it began, the Eagles have been on the go, and they're finally hitting. They're finally out there going full speed once again. It's a great point, but that also doesn't make up for the fact that this is the NFL and you should be conditioned to that, and you should expect heat in Miami, and you should expect the worst when you go down there. And look at the results on the field today. You could see, I would say, a day where you have to alleviate that and get through that. It's like coming to Colorado. People talk about the elevation all the time. Folks, I've lived here for 2 years. It still hits me. There's times I'm walking up the stairs and I get lightheaded. And that's how it is going down to Miami, that heat, that humidity in the middle of August. If you've never been down there, it is something different. And playing against a high-quality team where
then you got to
Slay,
cover 2-4.
Yeah, you have to cover Tyreek Hill, and you're going at 75 miles an hour all day long. It's not going to be easy. So tomorrow, you would hope that they get back on track.
Friday's going to be big.
Yeah, their legs get back under them. And when you look at the practices, or Thursday is going to be big for them. Friday will be a big rest day going into Saturday.
Yes.
And you have to look at tomorrow and say, can we not stack back-to-back days that were poor? That's what you have to take away from practices. And that's what I ultimately take away. You can look at all the one-on-one videos. You can look at all of the clips you want of somebody getting burned in a drill where it is meant for a wide
Well,
receiver
and Gino, that's
to
all
win.
one-on-ones. I mean, the A.J. Brown tore up Xavier Howard on that one rep where he had that amazing one-handed catch we're seeing going around Twitter. DeVonta Smith totally mossed a corner as well today. An amazing catch. Yeah, Tyreek Hill got the best of Darius Slay. That was a trending video as well. But as you said, one-on-ones, receivers, especially if you're a star receiver like DeVonta Smith, A.J. Brown, Tyreek Hill, or Jalen Waddle, who didn't practice today, had some tightness. But regardless, if he's on the field later today in practice, he's going to do the same thing. If you're a star receiver, one-on-ones, even against Darius Slay, Xavier Howard, Byron Jones, James Bradbury, you should win 90% of those reps.
Mm-hmm. I would say so as well. And that's the key going into the next practice, to eliminate back-to-back days that were poor, as I said prior, because that tended to be the situation last year, where the first couple weeks of camp, it seemed that the offense was sputtering out a little bit. Even the defense, when they were on top of the offense, they had some days where in Jonathan Gannon's first year, it was up or down. But now everything is in place, and you had the horses, as we have said, the last 2 weeks talking about these joint practices. Saturday will be a whole different discussion. We don't know who's going to play. But if the last setting that you want your ones to be in is in a bad day of practice, and to leave that taste in your mouth until you walk and go and play Detroit a couple of weeks later, I want to leave that practice knowing that they fought back after not winning that first day, not always getting the better of their opponents. And it seemed that things were going right for them coming out of Cleveland. That's not the NFL. And as Eagles supporters, we know there's going to be bad days. There are going to be days where you simply are stuck in the mud and can't do anything. But can you eliminate stacking those days on top of each other? Because those good teams know how to fight through adversity. They know how to fight through those hot days. Come tomorrow or come today when they practice, and then come 2 days from now, they better be ready. They better not have any more excuses. I don't want to hear the players talk about the heat getting to them and see guys pulling up with cramps. Like, you got to be ready to go, man. This is the NFL. There's no excuses at this level.
Well, and at the same time, though, I've seen enough good this summer, too, and I trust the maturity and the preparation of this team, the short-term memory, where it's not going to be like I remember in the Dream Team, the preseason was such a disaster. Remember when Andy Reid and Cullen Jenkins actually got into it? It was 2012. It was the year after on the sidelines because there was so much pressure mounting on that team, and they looked so bad in the preseason, and they put a lot of stock into that. Coming out of the gate, that really did hurt them. This team, I trust that even if they had a couple sluggish days of practice, they're not going to put too much into that. They're going to take the bad with the good. They're going to know what to improve upon and get ready for the season. So at the same time, I've seen enough good this year to know the potential of this team. And they've looked good against Cleveland, which was a good roster. Even today they had, or I should say on Wednesday, they had wins against the Dolphins. And I do trust this roster that they won't allow something like that, a couple days of practice, to really throw anything off the rails. But I just, again, as you mentioned, we want to see this team improve. We want to see them finish things off right. But I just want to see this team healthy, too. And, we got a little scared today with that Darius Slay injury where he came off limping after that one-on-one drill with Tyreek Hill, came back to practice, did a few more reps in 7-on-7s, came off again with a limp. It looks like it's not serious. He was on the sidelines the rest of practice watching, so he wasn't being attended to. But just, again, put Slay and all these important pieces in bubble wrap at this point. I've seen enough where, it would be great to have a strong practice to finish things off today, but just get me through the rest until Detroit.
That's interesting that you brought that up, because I was going to take us back a couple of years too. I believe it's the last time the Eagles have played the Browns in the preseason, and that was coming off of the Super Bowl year in 2017.
Which was also, want a jersey stat about that? That was the last time they wore green jerseys in the preseason before Sunday.
That Cleveland game?
Sorry. Yeah, I had to throw that in. I love jersey analytics, man. That's my thing.
And why I remember this is because it was the first time I ever came to Colorado, and I was watching the game with my old college roommate, and he was a Washington fan, and he's breaking my chops. The Eagles aren't really doing anything in the preseason. They couldn't get things going.
They look bad, man. Really
They
bad.
looked very bad. And we saw how that kind of came to fruition once the regular season started.
They weren't good in that Atlanta win, dude.
They stumbled out of the blocks.
They had to pull back Philly out of the playbook to make things alive.
And I look at what we've seen so far this year, Lou. I've never had that moment where I think back to that game saying, when week 1 hits, were there any times in the preseason I had questioned if they were ready to go? Today, I'd say it's a bump in the road, one of those speed bumps when you're going through a nice neighborhood. Today isn't one of those days to panic about. And yes, you're coming off of a practice where maybe you didn't win one-on-ones, but you got Slay, you got A.J. Brown, you got DeVonta Smith, you got Jalen Hurts. All these guys battled as well as anybody, and they're going to battle all season long.
It's a good
point.
Like
you said, to wrap it all together, how that 2018 preseason began was limping into that offseason with all of those injuries. This go-around, you are pristine in a way.
Right. The reason they were struggling, Gino, right, was there's reason to be concerned. With this one, there isn't.
Right. Yeah, they were. I mean, Nick Foles is starting for you because
Alshon had the shoulder surgery,
yeah,
so
Alshon's
he was out.
A lot of the guys on defense that were hurt in the Super Bowl were still coming back from their injuries as well. This go around, it's great to see that they have performed in all stages. They performed when the pads were off early in preseason. Once they got the pads on and things were hitting, going against your team, they got it going and they were clicking there as well. Up and down days all around. But then you get to the practices and it's the same thing. You never stacked multiple bad days. And that's what they need to take away. Stay healthy. Don't stack multiple bad days. Go into Saturday and let the 2s, 3s, and 4s figure out that situation. The 1s are already set. I'm good.
Look, if they have 2 bad practices, if there's 2 bad practices, even if they don't perform today, do not be the team that's not happy with that and force the starters on the field Saturday. Again, I think we've seen enough strong performances this summer against their own team and against others that they should be good until Detroit for sure. But Gino, things aren't done. They do have the joint practice later on today. They have the game on Saturday. The regular season's still 18 days away. This team has a lot to get done and everybody's still working, including the front office. Gino, Howie Roseman made another summer trade. It wasn't a massive one, but there's a lot of takeaways we have. So we'll get into that coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. Today's episode of Locked On Eagles is brought to you by Brightco. Brightco is going to help cover yourself when it is time to pop the big question. For me, my best friend got engaged a couple years ago at our lake house trip we take every year. One of my other great friends just got engaged to his girlfriend in our last lake house trip a couple months ago. My brother did it in the Grand Canyon in Arizona where my parents live. So it is, sometimes guys can get bold. They want to make this moment amazing for their future wife forever. Of course, the ring is the big part of that, right? But it also has to do with the scene where you are. They want to make a big splash with the engagement, right? Sometimes it could go wrong. What if my friend dropped his ring and it fell all the way to the bottom of a murky lake with a lot of seaweed? It would have been nearly impossible without a submarine or a scuba suit to find that ring. Or what if my brother ended up tripping and the ring box falls down the Grand Canyon? You are not taking a kayak down there to go find it. That's where Brightco comes in. They're going to cover you. You don't want to be that guy, and you certainly don't want it splattered all over the internet. The guys at Brightco Jewelry Insurance will make sure you get a replacement for the full value of that ring if that nightmare does happen. No matter if it's lost, stolen, or you just can't figure out what happened to it, go to bright.com/locked-on. It's the fastest and easiest and cheapest way to cover your butt with the best jewelry insurance in the business at Brightco. All right, Eagles fans, we thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Make sure your second listen is the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast with Vinny Liar, who has 20-plus years of fantasy experience. It's draft week across NFL fantasy players, so make sure you get all the insight on what you should do in your draft with the Fantasy Football, Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast on all podcast platforms. On today's Locked On Eagles, Gino, we're recapping the Eagles-Dolphins joint practice on Wednesday. Looking forward to today's practice as well on this Thursday, and also recapping another trade. Howie Roseman, we said it before the show, man. I think sometimes, considering the lesser magnitude of these moves, I think the guy just gets bored sometimes and just loves to trade. So he ended up dealing Ugo Amadi to the Tennessee Titans, and the deal is the Titans get Amadi and the Eagles' 7th round pick in 2024. The Eagles move up from that 7th pick to the 6th round in 2024. So Ugo Amadi, days after getting him in that trade with Seattle, that included J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, he's now shipped off to Tennessee. The Eagles move up from round 7 to 6, and Howie stays dealing. I mean, he has made so many moves in the summer, and a lot of them are like this, so I just think the guy likes to make moves.
It was short-lived, Ugo, and
yeah,
he'll do better
Ducks, man.
in Tennessee. I believe that he wasn't going to make the roster with what they have at safety. I believe Josiah Scott, the way he has played, the role that he has had, his ability to play special teams as well, and just being in camp and being on the team for over a year.
Ugo Wallace, Tart, Shashir as well. I mean, it's a lock. There wasn't really a spot for him.
So what Howie did was he played the long short game in a way that he got a player in J.J. Arcega-Whiteside that he couldn't get much for. He couldn't even get a late round draft pick. But he says, okay, there's a player in Ugo Amadi who plays a position that might be more coveted than what J.J. is, a converted tight end / wide receiver. Ugo plays an overhang / corner / safety position. Very versatile, very good on special teams. That position's coveted in the NFL in the depths of rosters. So Howie took his garbage, in a sense, sent it out of town, got something of worth, and it was reported that when Ugo came to Philadelphia that there was interest around the league from other teams. So Howie said, all right, I'm going to peek into that interest. I'm going to pick the phones back up, and I'm going to do – he has to patent this. This is the Howie special. This is the Tim Jernigan trade. This is, I'm going to take a pick. I'm going to swap it with your pick, and I'm going to get a player as well. Well, they did the reverse of that.
Thinking, it's creative. I totally agree.
And even though it's a 6th-round pick, you could have got JJ off the roster for nothing. You could have never got Ugo Amadi, and you could have had this 7th-round pick. But instead, you're now able to bump yourself up a couple points in terms of draft capital that you have. Because if the Eagles want to make a move up, Lou, for, let's say, if there's a big position available next year when your big position player doesn't work out potentially, or if you want to make a stab at Will Anderson, let's say, just hypothetically speaking, you want as much and I would say the most valuable amount of capital possible. 7th-round picks, throw those things out the window at this point. But you got a 6th-round pick, which you can now potentially use to couple to get a 5th-round pick. This guy just, he never sits on his hands. He's that dealer playing 3-card Monty in New York.
And when he's making a move, he's getting ready for one move. He's thinking 3 moves down.
Exactly.
Whereas some other general managers are very tunnel vision. It's one move, then the next and the next. Howie is very forward thinking. And again, this trade isn't massive. It's Ugo Amadi in a 7th for a 6th-round pick. In the grand scheme of things, does that matter a whole lot? No, but I love what you mentioned. It's really it's more what the trade represents about Howie. It really highlights 2 of his biggest strengths. And one is his creativity. And I think you've noticed this. You mentioned the Timmy Jernigan trade in 2017. His creativity overall to build a contender. Howie really, and I said he loves to make deals just to make deals, but that's how he built a huge part of how he built the Super Bowl roster in 2017 was trading for other people's assets that maybe they didn't want for reasons that didn't have much to do with football. And that was at a time when the NFL wasn't the trade heavy league it is right now. It was not like the NBA style that it has today. Howie kind of started that in 2017. And you've seen this year, in the last 2 years, he's now been seeing how the trade era is here. So he's collecting future picks that gives him flexibility down the road while everybody else is throwing those picks around. And it gives him more flexibility to be aggressive because he's got more ammunition than you do. He's having his cake and he's eating it too. And the other strength it shows is that he's so in tune with what's going on around the league. As you said, there was a lot of teams that had interest in Amadi, way more interest than teams had in JJ. He probably was not going to be able to do the same move to Tennessee or another team with JJ that he could do with Amadi. So it's that forward thinking. It's the knowledge he has across the league and his sense of value and just the creativity. It really highlighted that in this trade. Again, it's not a massive deal when it comes to the X's and O's and in a vacuum, but I love what it represents about Roseman. And again, I've always said the things that he is not great at, but I think we've also highlighted in the show what he's great at, and this trade does show that.
You can look at how many times that he has made these moves with pieces and gotten minimal back, but it's still more than most general managers around the league would get. Look at Matt Pryor. You get a minimal round pick back for him. Well, you moved Joe Flacco and got an asset for him. And he also took advantage, and you talk about the acquiring part of it. What he got Gardner Minshew for last year was a severe underpayment. And look at what his return on investment most likely will be. It could potentially be a third-round comp pick. So that's, to your point, he's not making that move with just one thing in mind. He's looking at the beginning, he's looking at the process, and he's looking at the end result. All those factors that go into this player evaluation process. He knows when to buy. He knows when to sell. This guy would kill it on Wall Street. Like, let's be serious. He would just be in the ear of somebody right
He's got
before.
The personality for it too.
He would have sold off all of Enron before the Enron scandal happened back in the 80s. And he definitely does have that personality. I don't know why you would pick up the phone when Howie Roseman answers, especially in the month of August, Lou. He just tends to do this. You look at the Jordan Matthews, Ronald Darby swap a couple years ago. You look at minimal moves like we mentioned prior, Alan Barber. Years ago, they traded him to the Denver Broncos for a 6th-round pick. Well, what was Gardner Minshew acquired for last year, Lou?
Wasn't it a 6?
A 6th-round selection.
Well, and that's the thing too. This team is so good at landing core pieces late in drafts that you have to take these trades seriously. You have to put more stock into it than some teams, because a 6th-round pick is Quez Watkins. A 7th-round pick is Jordan Mailata, your cornerstone 7th-round pick. Even if it's like a 4th, it's a little bit higher. That's Josh Sweat or Avonte Maddox. This team is very good at nailing day 3 picks, undrafted rookies as well, finding value and turning trash into treasure. And so that's why, again, when an NFL fan that's not an Eagles guy sees this move, they're like, whatever, on to the next story. And again, it's not super exciting, but it's significant in Philadelphia. Moving up from round 7 to 6 can be big. It could be the difference between Quez Watkins and Clayton Thorson. You know what I mean? It's just, you got to take everything seriously that this team does when it comes to trading and when it comes to value in the draft.
Clayton Thorson was a 5th-round pick, my friend.
I know.
I hate to remind
but
you.
The talent of him made me think he was later.
I've mentioned on this show several times, and I believe I've used this quote. It's from the movie War Dogs. They talk about money being made in the crumbs. That the NFL as a whole, right? Like, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. But really, when it boils down to it, it all comes down to minute moves like that. Like in fantasy football, I bet you the guy that wins the league for that player isn't even on a roster week 1. It happens all the time, right, Lou? So when you look at Howie Roseman, he's always going to make money in the crumbs. He's going to find those areas where he might be able to get a little bigger slice of the pie than you, and he's going to take advantage of it. Some GMs, they might have picked up the phone and said, no, we're going to cut this guy next week. Why do we even care to file the paperwork on this? Well, Howie Roseman, take another bow. If you continue to do this, and if we go back, and this would be an interesting exercise, to see how many times he's made moves like this where he does happen to move up, does happen to get a late-round pick, and the amount of value that he's added that way. Because I'm sure those crumbs add up to a whole slice, if not a whole pie. And that's what the NFL comes down to. You have to take every resource at your availability and use it to its fullest extent. And whether that 7th-round pick that turned into a 6th ever becomes anything, who knows? But the track record shows, Lou, the Eagles have had success doing moves like this. If it's not broken, don't fix it. The Howie special, the old pick swap / player trade, happens to work time and time again.
It's a great point. Today's episode of Locked On Eagles is brought to you by LinkedIn. As you gear up for the fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small business fire on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond. to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know that every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Gino, before we wrap up the show, getting back into what's going on the field, and I thought about this today because of Jordan Davis's press conference, and he highlighted how, again, he's been learning from Jason Kelce after practice, Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave. He was even getting pointers, it sounded like today, with Dolphins offensive linemen after plays about what he could do differently with pass rushing moves. He talked about how Cox and Hargrave, some of the biggest things he's taken away from them is like his get off the line of scrimmage, coming off more explosive to gain him leverage. I wanted to ask you before we wrap up the show, because I was thinking specifically about Jordan Davis's pass rushing moves. Is there another player, and there's like a certain trait that you want to see that guy figure it out this year that could really take him to the next level? Because I know Jordan Davis is a rookie, but I do feel like if that guy can do more than just a bull rush move where he comes off like a rocket off the line of scrimmage. I heard he tried a spin move last week and it worked on one-on-ones and the whole sideline went nuts. If he's got counter moves now as a pass rusher on the inside, like what that can unlock with this kid's potential. Like Jordan Davis, are there other players too that there's specific traits we want to see them figure out?
I think we've talked about the big one with Jalen Hurts time and time again. If he can really hone in on the middle part of the field and utilize over 33% of the playing surface as a whole, he's going to vastly improve his availability to open up the rest of this playbook. I look at other players. I don't think you're going to look at the big names and really find something. But if you look at those role players, I 100% love this exercise because I look at a player. I'll take Quez Watkins, for example. And I take a player who, if you look at his skill set, kind of shares a similar way he played to Deshaun Jackson in my extent, where coming out of college, these are two guys. They're going to be Z receivers. They're going to play off the line. They're not going to play against press, but they're going to dominate down the field with their speed. Well, Quez does have that 50-50 ability that Deshaun never had. But what Deshaun developed over his years was his ability as a route runner. Imagine if Quez Watkins can become even 60 to 75% of the route runner that Deshaun Jackson ever became in his career. Because you have your one who's a lead at it. You have your two who is a lead at it. The game opens up when you have that third guy, and I hate using this player's name, but he really, I don't know how he isn't on a roster right now. Cole Beasley, a Hunter Renfrow type player. That third guy, that slot guy that can just put you in a phone booth and beat you, and you have no chance to stop him in a two-way go. That's really what Quez Watkins can become. I truly believe in what we saw last year, even in what he's done in just a full camp this year and half a camp last year, to develop his game from what we saw at Southern Miss. He still has a long way to go, but you can see it. Like with Deshaun, you saw that evolution start to take place where he just looked a little crisper. He didn't round out things as much. He was able to get in and out of his movements a lot easier and just not being a one-speed type of guy, gearing up, gearing down. Man, Quez at that type of player is a scary thought.
I agree. Another one, too, before we wrap up the show. I feel like Miles Sanders has really come on the last couple of years. I was really impressed. And, you've had this critique of him, as have a lot of people. His indecisiveness at times, his lack of vision when it comes to the right gap to go through, when it's time to just take the yards you've got versus making more happen. But I really like what I saw last year when he was healthy in the second half of the season. I thought he ran a lot more decisive. I thought his decision-making was a whole lot better. But, it felt like now that part came to his game, his receiving ability, though, the last 2 years it isn't nearly as close as what it was in 2019. We got to remember, like people now don't see
he was
Miles
the best
Sanders.
receiver on the team.
Yes, he was.
We don't have to say more than that.
He was their most explosive player. He was their deep threat when Deshaun Jackson went down. If he can combine the 2019 receiving ability, that was one of the most explosive receiving backs in all of football, on top of the second half running style of 2021, that is a player, of course, he's got to stay healthy, that can command a nice second contract for that position. I want to see the 2019 version of Miles Sanders again. That's making diving catches in the end zone from Carson Wentz, that rocket against Washington at the end of the year. And he's a wheel route down the left sidelines, because as much as I love Kenneth Gainwell's ability in that area, he lined up at receiver all the time in Memphis. Sanders is a more explosive, fluid athlete in the open field that if he can get that receiving ability back, that's going to be a huge part. So I think, you made a good point. Quez Watkins, Miles Sanders, if those two can figure out those areas, I mean, this offense, the sky is already the limit. It's going to go to the moon at that point.
I got another one for you who I think fits into this same type of mold where they're in their first couple of years getting ready to go into their second contract. Well, actually, he already does have a second contract. That's because he has an interesting case. If TJ Edwards could truly figure out and carry over how good his coverage has been in the preseason to the regular season, the Eagles might have lucked into a true 3-down linebacker. He is the best run stopper on the team. He's the best pure tackler on the team. His missed tackle numbers are so minute. I don't even think he had any missed tackles. I believe he had one last year or a couple last year, but the year before that, I don't think he had any documented missed tackles. But you add in that coverage element, I thought Bo Wolf had a great point on this in his Athletic article. It's TJ Edwards is always the guy that you want to keep off the field, but he always keeps giving you excuse that you can't keep him off the field.
It's a good point.
And if he becomes that guy, Lou, you might have him. You might have Kaiser White. You might have Nakobe Dean, who could be your three-headed dragon at that position for a couple years or so, and if not more. And with Davian up in the air, you might have to luck into that position like you lucked into Quez Watkins taking a guy late. Maybe even Sean Bradley comes into the equation. But right now, with what TJ has done on the field, with his leadership, with how much the team trusts him to already have given him that 2-year contract extension, they like him in this organization, man. And I think he's very underappreciated around the national.
Hey, man, I get it. I've been trying to force him off the field for years now.
we both have, my friend.
Yeah, because I'm a traits guy, but you're totally right. Sometimes production is just production. And if he's figured it out in a different way, he doesn't. I want guys to run as fast as Davian Taylor and have the football IQ of Nakobe Dean, right? But, however he gets the job done, if the job is done, the job is done. So
right.
It's a good point. If he keeps making those plays, he's going to stay on the football field, and then you can't say much. So, TJ Edwards, Quez Watkins, Miles Sanders, Jordan Davis, a lot of guys that if they figure out a few traits, they can unlock even more potential for sure. Let us know what you think. Hit us up on Twitter at LockdownBirds, at GC24_football, and at DiBiase LOE. Subscribe to Locked On Eagles on all podcast platforms and on YouTube as well. That's going to do it for this Thursday edition of the show. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Make sure your second listen is the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Get ready for your drafts this week with Vinny Liar, free and available on all shows, on all platforms, I should say. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. As always, thank you for downloading. Thank you for watching and listening. Locked On Eagles, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.